Persians weren't the only ones to overrun Jerusalem. The whole area of Palestine was taken by Muslim conquerors in 636 and 637. And this is when we date the start of the medieval period in Jewish history. In the medieval period, the Jews lived in a great many different places, scattered all around, but nearly always underneath some Islamic or Christian ruler. How they fared varied greatly depending on the ruler, and their position was always precarious. If the public or if the ruler changed their view of the Jews, they could lose everything. By around the year 1200, Jews were scattered in the following areas. First, they were across North Africa, including the cities of Alexandria, Egypt, and Cairo, Egypt. There were some down along the Nile. There were some down in what's today Ethiopia. At the time it was called Abyssinia, in what later became Yemen, in the part of the world where Muhammad was to start another world religion, in the area of their former kingdom, what had been called Judea and Palestine by the Romans. In many eastern areas, what used to be part of the Babylonian and Assyrian empires. And again, there were some in England, in many places in what became Spain and Portugal in the modern era, in France, in what became Germany, some parts of Italy, various portions of Eastern Europe, even a few on the west coast of India. That's roughly where they were then, right in the middle of the Middle Ages. During the medieval period, Jews were almost always what we would call second-class citizens. In Islamic lands, they were called dhimmis. That means protected peoples. Frankly, that's a euphemism. As dhimmis, they had fewer rights than regular citizens, and they had to pay a special tax, which could sometimes be onerous. In Christian lands, there were typically restrictions on marriage. Very often the Jews had to wear identifying clothing, marking them as Jews so that people knew who they were interacting with. And from the 11th century on, there were periodic pogroms. A pogrom is an organized persecution of an ethnic group. It's typically used to refer to violent outbursts against Jews. Oftentimes, these would be started by crazy rumors that the Jews were involved in ritual murder, that they were using the blood of Christian babies or Christian children to make their bread. These crazy rumors are called the blood libel. Again, there were rumors that the Jews had poisoned the well, that people in town were getting sick because the evil Jews had secretly put poison in there, or that the Jews had taken the host, the blessed bread of the Christian Eucharist, and desecrated it, thus desecrating the body of Christ. In a number of cases, these pogroms were carried out by crusading Christian armies, basically organized mobs on their way to join the Crusades, which we'll talk about in our unit on Christianity. In a number of cases, Christian bishops and kings tried to protect the Jews from these mobs, but only with limited success. Jews, sometimes hundreds and thousands of them, were murdered in various incidents. In some places in the Middle Ages, there were forced conversions, where rulers said, "Convert or die." And of course, when you do that, some people will convert, some people will die, and some people will pretend to convert in order to save their lives. By the year 1500, they had been expelled from much of Western Europe. Rulers, jealous of the Jews' money and property, would just decide to kick out the Jews and take all their stuff, and this happened repeatedly. These expulsions, mainly starting in the 1200s and continuing up to around 1500, led to an ethnic division among the Jews of the world. The Sephardim, or the Sephardic Jews, were exiles from Spain and Portugal, and they ended up settling mostly in the Muslim Ottoman Empire. The other group are called the Ashkenazim, or the Ashkenazi Jews. These are groups that fled to Eastern Europe, where they eventually developed Yiddish, a blend of German and Hebrew. This division, though, went back to earlier times. It wasn't created in the High Middle Ages. In our next and last segment of this lecture, the modern era of Judaism.